They came to take her house. What they didn't expect was that she'd be waiting at the door. "Hi there, sweetheart. Before we jump into it, how have you been holding up lately? Has your arthritis been flaring up with this wild weather? The grandkids still coming by on Sundays? I sure hope so. If not, maybe this story will give you something to pass on to them, because it's about standing tall when the world tries to bury you." Let me tell you about Charlene Maddox, 58 years old, widow, 2 grown kids, one out in Phoenix, one barely calling anymore. She had a house that creaked in the right places, a front porch with a swing, and a mortgage that should have been done by now, but wasn't. The thing is, Charlene didn't ask for trouble. She didn't chase lawsuits, didn't owe money to any loan sharks. All she wanted was peace, but you know how life goes. Peace costs more than people think. It started with a letter, a cold, flat envelope with her name, typed like it didn't belong to a real person. Inside, a notice of foreclosure, claimed she owed back payments tied to a second mortgage, a loan she swore she never took. Charlene's hand shook as she read it, not because of fear, but because of fury. She called the bank. They passed her off. She called a lawyer. He wanted a $5,000 retainer. She called her son. Voicemail. And just like that, the world expected her to fold, to pack up her life, kiss the walls goodbye, and walk away from the only place she'd ever truly called home. But Charlene had roots deeper than the county records. You ever watch a woman decide she's got nothing left to lose? It was a Wednesday when the sheriff's deputies showed up. 2 of them, not rude, but not kind either. Just doing their job, they said. Papers in hand, a locksmith on standby, a camera crew nearby, because eviction cases were becoming hot content online now. Charlene stepped out onto the porch, still in her robe, hair wrapped, coffee in hand. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just looked them in the eye and said, "You want to come in? Then come in if you dare, but I won't help you pack my life into boxes." And the neighbor across the street, Mrs. Emery, retired school teacher with a camera for bird watching, happened to be filming it all. The deputies hesitated. One of them stepped back. And Charlene? She crossed her arms and said, "This house was bought with blood, sweat, and Sunday casseroles. If you think some paperwork's gonna scare me, try again." The video hit the internet that night, and something unexpected happened. People watched and shared. 1 million views in 2 days, and with that spotlight, the story unraveled fast. The loan, fraudulent. A predatory lender had forged her signature, targeted older Black homeowners, and used shady legal loopholes to steal their homes. But not this time. Charlene didn't run. She stood. "Tell me, have you ever been backed into a corner so tight, the only way out was to fight?" And this was just the beginning. By Saturday morning, Charlene's front porch didn't belong to her anymore. Oh, the house was still hers for now, but the porch, that was national property. Cameras, reporters, activists, curious neighbors who never said hello before were suddenly bringing coffee and asking, "What does it feel like to go viral?" Viral, like it was a game, like this wasn't about a woman who just wanted to be left in peace. Charlene sat in her rocking chair, arms crossed, eyes tired. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours since the video exploded. The same video that showed her daring the deputies to come in, the same one that made people call her a hero. But she wasn't trying to be a hero. She was just trying to keep the roof that still held her memories. You ever feel like people are cheering for you while you're still drowning? A lawyer from Atlanta reached out, Brandon Cobb, young, sharp, suited too clean for small towns. He offered to take the case pro bono. "You're the face of something now," he said. "People are watching." Charlene looked him dead in the eye. "I don't want to be the face of anything. I just want my damn house." Still, she let him help, because she wasn't stupid. And Cobb, he knew how to rattle cages. Within a week, they found forged signatures, missing disclosures, even a whistleblower email from a bank clerk warning the loan wasn't real clean. Charlene listened as Cobb explained it all, nodding, trying to keep up. But some nights, when the house got too quiet, she'd walk from room to room, touching the walls, whispering names, her husband's old flannel still hanging behind the door, a crack in the hallway from the time her son tripped running on Christmas morning. They wanted to take all that. No, they would not. But then came the pushback. Letters from the bank's lawyers, claims of defamation, threats to sue for damages, quiet pressure from local officials who didn't like the spotlight on Monroe County. Cobb stayed calm, but Charlene could see the fight in his eyes too. And when he left each night, she was still alone, still pacing, still wondering what would happen if this all fell apart. Have you ever been so tired from fighting, you started to wonder if it was worth it? One night after the 5th news van packed up and left, a knock came at the door. It wasn't media. It was Marcy Thomas, the clerk from the loan office. Late 40s, thick glasses, hands trembling. "I saw what they did," she said. "I kept my mouth shut, but I can't anymore." Charlene opened the door wide. "Come in, honey. You're not the first woman to keep quiet because someone told her to." That night, the case turned, because the truth always leaves a trail, even when someone tries to burn it. Marcy Thomas sat on Charlene's worn couch like it was holy ground. She held her purse in her lap the entire time, fingers clenched so tight around the strap, it looked like she was afraid it might run away. Her eyes darted to the curtains. She spoke in whispers, even when they were alone. "I wasn't part of it," she said. "Not the forgery. I just processed the documents." Charlene poured tea. "But you saw something." Marcy nodded. "They'd come in late, real late. I'd get files already signed." I asked once, "Why does this signature look different from her last file?" And my boss, Mike, he said, "That's above your pay grade." Charlene didn't flinch. "Sounds like it's his time to pay." You ever have someone finally tell the truth and realize it's worse than you thought? Marcy brought records, names, printouts, a list of homes, 12 other homeowners, all black, all over the age of 50, all allegedly refinanced with balloon loans, forged signatures, and third-party debt companies that barely existed on paper. Charlene stared at the list. "This ain't just my house." "No, ma'am," Marcy said. "It never was." The next morning, Cobb brought in a new legal team, class action lawsuit, federal interest, media swarm. Charlene's porch was once again lined with strangers, but this time some were holding folders instead of microphones. And every one of them had a story: a woman in her 70s who lost her home after a stroke, a retired teacher whose house sold while she was in rehab, a war veteran who thought he missed a payment but never did. They all had one thing in common: no one believed them. Until Charlene stood on her porch, but now the people who caused the pain, they were nervous. The local lender's office went dark. Emails stopped getting answered. Someone painted traitor on Marcy's garage. Cobb warned Charlene, "They'll come after you now, not just legally, personally." Charlene looked out the window at the porch swing that still creaked from her husband's weight. They already did, and I'm still here. But she wasn't unshaken. That night, someone threw a brick through her front window. It missed her by 2 feet. Police came, took a report, shrugged. "No cameras?" they asked. Charlene pointed at her neighbor's house. "Birdwatcher caught the last one. Maybe she'll catch this one too." But Mrs. Emery wasn't home. Her house had gone dark. You ever realize the spotlight that made you feel seen also makes you a target? Charlene didn't sleep that night. She sat in the kitchen, robe wrapped tight, holding a hammer in her lap like it was a sword. She wasn't afraid. She was awake to how deep the rot ran, awake to how powerful people play dirtier when you threaten what they've built. But more than anything, She was awake to the fact that if she didn't see this through, no one else would. It was Tuesday morning when the black SUV rolled up Charlene's street, not unmarked, but quiet. Government plates, suits with stern faces, FBI. One of them introduced himself as Agent Darrell Green, said he'd been tracking predatory lending cases in the South for years. "You're not the first, Ms. Maddox," he told her, "but you might be the last, if we do this right." Charlene offered coffee because even when you're speaking to federal agents, you don't forget your manners. She watched them pore over Marcy's documents. Cobb stood in the corner, arms crossed, jaw tight. Layla, his junior associate, took notes so fast her pen squeaked. "Paper trail looks legit," Agent Green said. "They've been flipping forged loans through shell companies, using intimidation, lawsuits, even payoffs." Charlene just nodded. "I know," she said. "They tried it on me." But what she didn't say was what she almost did. Years ago, back when her husband was still alive, back before the cancer, there had been a moment, a loan offer. Too good to be true. Charlene didn't take it, but she almost did. Back then, money had been tight, and her pride, strong as it was tired. Her husband begged her not to touch it. "You don't need no help from men who smile too fast," he said. She hadn't signed, but she'd considered it, and now that shame clawed its way back up from where she'd buried it. What if they find a document? What if it looks like I almost agreed? What if they twist it? You ever carry guilt not because you did something wrong, but because you almost did? That night, Charlene pulled out a box from the back of her closet. Inside, bills, letters, an old church fan with fading gospel lyrics. And deep at the bottom, a pre-approval letter dated 2011 with her name in a faint blue ink. Unsigned, unreturned, but real. She stared at it a long time, and the next morning, she handed it to Cobb. "You sure?" he asked. "This could complicate your testimony." "I'm sure," she said. "If I'm standing for truth, I ain't hiding mine." Cobb didn't say a word, just took the paper and nodded once. That's when Charlene realized something. This wasn't about keeping the house anymore. This was about earning the right to stand in it again. The next court hearing was packed. Camera crews outside, protesters with signs. Neighbors who used to avoid eye contact now wore T-shirts that said, "Let her stay." Charlene walked in slow, not broken, not even tired, just ready. Have you ever told the truth knowing it might hurt you, but you told it anyway because it would heal somebody else? Agent Green would take the stand next, but first, Charlene would. And she was about to tell a courtroom everything, even the part she never planned to. Courtroom 3B was packed, every seat filled, extra chairs brought in, reporters hunched in the back, a local artist sketching quietly in the corner. The judge, a woman named Gloria Mahoney, looked over the crowd with that mix of curiosity and gravity that only comes with age. Charlene took the stand wearing a simple navy dress, no frills, just her. Cobb asked her name, her address, her relation to the home, and then, "Tell us what happened the day they came to take your house." Charlene's voice didn't tremble, not at first. "I was having coffee," she said. "Hadn't even changed out my robe. I saw two men I didn't know walking up my steps. One had a badge, the other had papers. And I knew," she paused. "I knew they weren't here to ask me anything. They were here to take something. You ever look someone in the eye and know their decision's already been made?" Cobb let her speak freely. No objections, no interruptions. She told the jury about the letter, the phone calls, the silence, about the video, the neighbors, the brick, about the long nights with a hammer in her lap and nobody calling to check in. And then she reached into her bag. "I want to show you something," she said. She held up the pre-approval letter, the one she never signed, the one she'd hidden for years. "This here," she said, "is what I could have done, what I almost did." Murmurs rippled through the room. But I didn't. Not because I'm perfect, but because my husband said, "Don't dance with wolves, baby, just because they bring you flowers." A pause. And when he passed, I forgot that for a while. I forgot a lot. But when those men came for my house, I remembered everything. The courtroom went quiet. Not courtroom quiet, but church quiet. The judge leaned forward. One juror wiped a tear. Even Hardin, the bank's lead counsel, looked shaken. Charlene sat back, folded her hands, and finished with this. "You ain't gotta believe I'm innocent. You just have to believe I'm done being quiet." Outside the courthouse, the crowd roared. Inside, the prosecution scrambled. But Charlene? She stepped off the stand with the grace of a woman who had already won, even if the verdict hadn't come yet. Because what she'd reclaimed wasn't just her house, it was her voice. "Tell me this. What truth have you been holding inside, waiting for the right moment to speak?" It only took 48 hours after Charlene's testimony, 48 hours, and the courthouse phones rang off the hook. People calling from all over Monroe County, then Macon, then Atlanta. Some whispered, some wept, some just said, "Me too." By the time the next hearing opened, 11 more people had come forward. Different names, same story. The courtroom gallery, once filled with curiosity seekers and camera crews, now held elders with folders in their laps. People who'd carried shame for years, who thought they'd been the only ones. Charlene sat among them, no longer the only voice, just one of many. And that somehow felt even stronger. You ever watch a room shift from silence to solidarity? It's louder than any protest. Agent Darrell Green took the stand. What he laid out shocked even the courtroom veterans. 3 shell companies, 5 forged notarizations, more than $3.7 million skimmed off homes that should have been paid off. "Predatory lending rings like this," Green said, "target the quiet ones, the proud ones, the folks they think won't fight." He looked right at Charlene. But this time, they guessed wrong. The bank's defense team collapsed under the weight of it. Hardin, red-faced, withdrew his objections and requested to be removed from the case. The judge denied him. "You brought this here," Judge Mahoney said. "You'll see it through." That night, Charlene went home to find a note taped to her front door. "Thank you. 38 Maple Street. We're still in our house because of you." She folded it carefully, placed it in her Bible, and sat in her porch swing until the sun went down. The next morning, Mrs. Emery, the neighbor with the birdwatcher's camera, came over with a pecan pie and a nervous smile. "I wasn't sure how to say it," she said, "but I've been filming you for a long time. Not in a weird way, just, the world needs more of your kind." Charlene raised an eyebrow. "My kind?" "The kind that makes other folks brave." What would happen if you told your story and it gave someone else permission to tell theirs? That's what Charlene had done, not by shouting, not by suing, but by standing. She didn't need a title, didn't need a microphone. She had her house. She had her truth. And now, she had an army. The trial was nearing its close. Evidence had been laid bare, the fraudsters exposed. Charlene's home and her voice secured by something far bigger than a verdict, truth in motion. The judge scheduled final arguments for Friday. By Thursday afternoon, Charlene had almost allowed herself to breathe, but then the call came. It wasn't from Cobb, not from the court, not from Marcy. It was her son, Derek, the same one who hadn't called in months, the one who didn't return messages when she first got the foreclosure notice, the one who only resurfaced after the news vans parked on the street. "Hey, Ma," he said, voice smooth, practiced. "You've been on TV. You're kind of famous now." Charlene tightened her grip on the phone. "What do you want, Derek?" A pause. "Look, I heard from some folks. There's money involved now, right? I mean, lawsuits, settlements. I was thinking maybe I could help you manage some of it." You ever feel that chill when someone calls you mama and it don't sound right anymore? Let me guess, Charlene said. They said I might get a payout. And you thought, why not come home now? It's not like that. You sure? Because it sure sounds like that. He paused, then dropped the charm. I could have fought for you, you know, if you'd just told me earlier. Charlene's voice didn't rise. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. I did tell you. You just didn't hear me until the cameras came. Click. She hung up, and for the first time since this all started, Charlene allowed herself 5 minutes to cry. Not because she lost, because even after everything, some wounds never stopped bleeding. The next morning, she showed up in court like nothing happened. Same navy dress, same calm, same power. She didn't mention the call to Cobb, didn't bring it up to the reporters, just sat down at the bench, hands folded, heart steel. Because this wasn't about family, it was about home. Have you ever had to move forward without the people you thought would walk beside you? Charlene had, and still, she walked. The final arguments began. Cobb spoke first, then the government. Then, surprisingly, the defense stood to offer a concession. They wouldn't fight the class action suit. They wouldn't contest the reversal of foreclosure. They just asked the court to close the record quietly. Judge Mahoney denied it. Number this record will stay open. People deserve to know how it happened and how it ended. And Charlene, she didn't say much that day. She didn't need to, because now the world was speaking for her. Courtroom 3. B was quiet again, not tense, not fearful, just reverent, like the moment before a storm breaks. But instead of thunder, you hear truth settling into place. Judge Mahoney cleared her throat, reading slowly from the bench. The court finds that the foreclosure against Mrs. Charlene Maddox was unlawful, based on fraudulent documentation and a pattern of predatory practices. All claims against her home are hereby vacated. Murmurs, then applause, then sobbing, some quiet, some not. Charlene didn't move, didn't flinch, just closed her eyes and let the words settle deep in her bones. You ever hear something you already knew but needed the world to say out loud anyway? Her house was safe, but that wasn't what made the room feel like a resurrection. It was what came next. The defendants named in the related class action will be referred for federal prosecution, the judge said. This court also recommends a review of mortgage lending practices statewide. That got attention, headlines, and pressure. Within 2 weeks, the state announced the creation of a new oversight board. They called it the Maddox Initiative. Charlene didn't ask for her name on it. She didn't fight it either. She just nodded quietly when Cobb told her, then asked him, "Can I get that in writing? I want to frame it right under my porch light." Back in Monroe, people started knocking on her door for a different reason, to thank her, to ask for advice, to share their stories. Divorced women trying to keep property, elderly neighbors facing legal notices they didn't understand, single parents buried in paperwork they didn't know how to fight. Charlene listened. She didn't always have the answers, but she always had time. And one Sunday afternoon, a young woman knocked on the door. Not a reporter, not a lawyer, just a kid, maybe 22, eyes tired, voice soft. "You're Ms. Maddox?" she asked. Charlene nodded. "My grandma's about to lose her house. She don't know who to talk to." Charlene stepped aside. "Come in, baby, let's figure it out. Because when the system forgets you, sometimes it takes one voice to remind the world you were here." Charlene hadn't just kept her home. She turned it into a lighthouse. 6 months later, Charlene stood on a stage in Washington, D.C., marble columns behind her, dozens of reporters in front, cameras blinking like stars in a nervous sky. The Department of Housing and Urban Development had just named her Citizen Advocate of the Year. She wore a silver shawl, Borrowed shoes, hair freshly pressed, not because she wanted to impress anybody, but because her mother always said you dress sharp when you speak the truth. Cobb was there, so was Layla, so was Marcy. And when they handed Charlene the plaque, she took it in both hands, stared at it a moment, then leaned toward the microphone. "I didn't do this for awards," she said. "I did it because I didn't want to sleep on someone else's terms." A pause. "I ain't no hero. I'm just a woman who refused to lie down when the world told her to bend." Have you ever been praised for surviving something you never asked to live through? That's what this felt like. When the lights went down and the cameras clicked off, Charlene sat quietly backstage. One of the HUD officials approached, all energy and eager smiles. "You'd be perfect as a national spokesperson for anti-foreclosure advocacy. We've got a 6-city tour lined up, all expenses covered." Charlene looked at her hands. She remembered the porch swing, the creaking floors, the kitchen radio that only played one gospel station, no matter how she turned the dial. "I appreciate that," she said gently, "but I already got a tour. It's called My Neighborhood." They still got questions, and I got soup on the stove. That night, back home in Monroe, Charlene walked the perimeter of her property. She touched the mailbox, ran her hand along the siding, pressed her palm to the window pane like she was thanking it for holding her story in all these years. Inside, a pie cooled on the counter. A notebook sat open on the table filled with names, dates, handwritten lists of folks who needed help. She wasn't done, not yet, but she didn't need a podium to keep doing the work. She had a chair, a porch, and a voice that people finally heard. You ever think maybe your legacy isn't what you leave behind, but what you leave alive in others? That's what Charlene Maddox had become. A spark, a keeper of fire. You wouldn't know anything had changed just by looking at the house. Same blue shutters, same porch swing, same crack in the walkway that Charlene always said she'd fix next spring. But inside was history, the kind made not by presidents or preachers, but by a woman who said no when the world expected her to disappear. It had been a year since the verdict. Most of the headlines had faded. The cameras stopped calling, but the letters kept coming. Cards from widows in Tennessee, emails from single moms in Detroit, handwritten notes from elderly veterans who said, "I thought I was the only one." Charlene read them all. She didn't always reply, but she kept everyone in a shoebox under the bed, labeled Voices That Matter. You ever wonder if your voice would matter long after the noise has died down? One evening, a young girl from down the street came over to do a school project. She asked to interview Charlene. "What did it feel like to be famous?" Charlene laughed. "I wasn't famous, baby. I was loud enough at the right moment." The girl smiled, scribbled it down, and said, "They should teach you in schools." Charlene shook her head gently. "They should teach you how to recognize the fight in your own grandmama." That night, as the sun dipped below the edge of Monroe, Charlene sat on her porch, a fresh cup of tea in her hand, and watched the wind move through her trees like a hymn. And for the first time in a long time, she felt something she hadn't dared let herself feel before: rest, because she hadn't just saved her home. She had saved a piece of truth. She had reminded a nation that you can still win, even with trembling hands, a worn-out voice, and no one but yourself at the door. Now let me ask you, what are you holding on to that's worth standing for? And when the knock comes, will you open the door and say, like Charlene did, "There's nothing to lose. Come in if you dare." If this story stirred something in you, tell us. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their strength. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel Black Women, where real stories walk tall, speak truth, and never go quiet. Because silence is comfortable. But truth? Truth is what makes the world listen.